Well, one of the aspects of Reedham, sense is that it was plenty of discipline. We had a housemaster on the boys' side who was ex-army and truly believed in discipline and self-discipline, and certainly made himself felt. He became the scourge of pretty well every Reedham boy soon after they joined the school, and there was no doubt about it. It was really tough being at Reedham as a boy, and one increasingly learned to be disciplined, and no doubt as a consequence self-disciplined. But it was a very painful process for us to be, shall we say, learning to be self-disciplined. And when I tell you that pretty well everything we did was to orders, you will understand that you had to have your wits about you, otherwise you will get a punishment of one sort or another. One of the methods of the principal housemaster was the utilisation of something called drill, and that if you were caught doing something wrong by the housemaster, or in fact prefects, you could find yourself having to give up some of your free time, usually on a Saturday morning, where drill was invoked for those people, those boys who had got on the wrong side of the housemaster or the prefects. And the drill was what the name says, drill, marching drill, and that you would be given perhaps half an hour's drill during the week, and then you may do something else wrong and get another half an hour's drill, and you could find yourself with perhaps 2 or possibly 3 hours drill on a Saturday to respect the failings or things that you'd done wrong. That usually wasn't too much of a problem, because drill is after all only exercise, and it didn't do you any harm, and it probably did you a bit of good, although you didn't appreciate it. So yeah, it served to get the boys understanding the need to have a sense of order in everything, and that there was obviously a regime for doing most things, and that if you erred, then drill was quite often the penalty. I mean, for instance, we did everything to orders. You get up in the morning and you would arch your mattress, turn the mattress upside down. All the clothes would be spread over the arched mattress. You would then, having left your arched mattress on your bed and the bedclothes, you would then be marched downstairs to the wash lavatory, where you then washed. And so you would then, there wasn't enough basins for all the boys at one time, so you'd have 2 sets, first set and the second set, to wash in the morning. And those people who weren't on the first set for washing would do things like boot room boy. You would then clean the boots of, say, half a dozen. So you'd have a team of boys working in the boot room, polishing other boys' boots. So that was their job. And so all the jobs were split out. They were usually done on a sort of age basis. So as you went through the school, you did different jobs at different times of the day, whether it was morning or night. But again, you see that if you did something wrong, if you failed to be there, you would probably get punished and you would do drill. So that was that. So it did mean that because time was of the essence, because you had in effect 2 or 3 groups of boys doing things, you couldn't let them do it when they wanted to, so times were required and you had to keep going. So you used to have sets for this and sets for that. And so in order to make sure things didn't get out of hand time-wise, you had a prefect in charge who would then control, for instance, washing. So you would wash to orders, both in the morning and in the evening. A, they would try and ensure that you washed properly, and B, nobody missed out and the whole thing was done to time. But if anything went wrong, chances are the house master might see you and give you a kick round the ear, or you could be put on drill for half an hour or an hour if your crime was sufficiently worthy. But the great thing as far as the organisation was concerned, that you did your job properly and it was done to the time. So drill and working to orders was the name of the game. And of course with our housemaster, the principal housemaster, he was ex-army, and so he knew all about drill. He was an ex-drill sergeant, and so that was put into us in no uncertain fashion. I mean, just as an aside, I mean, I did my national service 5 or 6 years later because I had a deferment. So I was doing my national service when I was 23, 25. Most people went in at 18. But doing national service was a cakewalk compared to life at Reedham and the regimentation that went with our day-to-day life there. It was quite amazing. I mean, every Reedham boy I've spoken to subsequently talk about comparing notes, national service. They said, oh, no problem, you know, it was just walkover. So the discipline we had at Reedham was infinitely greater than anything that was on offer in the army, in national service. So that was an indicator of how tough our regime actually was. I mean, most of us would accept in the round that it was good and that it was beneficial to us. But there was I mean, I was doing my national service when I was 23 to 25. And even 5 or 7 years later, I was still sufficiently self-disciplined to feel comfortable with the operation that was mounted in the Air Force. That was clear proof that our regime achieved its purpose. Well, as I was saying earlier, the school, certainly the boys' side of the school, was highly disciplined, and most, if not all, things were done to orders. And I suppose you could argue that if you are going to get any sense of order, you've got to have a system. It's got to be disciplined. And as I was saying, we did most things to orders. I mean, even like the exchange of clothes, underwear and shirts, which was undertaken on a Saturday night, Sunday morning. on Saturday, everybody would get their clean shirt and underwear, what have you. And on the Sunday morning, it would the old or the dirty underwear and what have you were taken in and collected to go to the laundry. Well, this was done on the Sunday morning, and on one Sunday morning where we had to parade, so you used to have your dirty shirt, vest, pants, socks, whatever. You would then pass a set of prefects who would be counting the numbers of dirty clothes going into the basket. And if you had forgotten any of them, you were in trouble because you were upsetting the system. And on one occasion, which was very rare for me, I then passed round the baskets with all the different clothes, put the vest in, pants, and found that I hadn't got the socks, or one of them was missing. And the prefect said, you boy, stand there. In other words, you haven't put yours in, we want to make sure where it is. So I had to stand aside. And then when they'd finished the process, those of us who, for one reason or other, hadn't got one of the items of clothing, had to A, find it, and B, explain why you didn't have it with you on the parade. And so the housemaster then confronts me and said, what have you done? What is it? Well, I left it upstairs, and I was given a clout round the ear to the force that it knocked me over. I fell over, and I then obviously had to go and collect the item and put it in, and that was that. Well, that was on Sunday morning, and after that breakfast, it's all before breakfast, after breakfast, I didn't feel at all well, and then after breakfast every day you could parade or request to go onto the sanatorium queue. Go to the sanatorium, see a nurse if you weren't well. So then the housemaster would look at the list and say, right, who are these boys? They all went to go to the sanatorium. So he'd then say, who are you? What are you doing? You know. Well, I then stood like, my face is hurting. And so I then went on down to marched round to the sanatorium with others. And then I was found out that I'd got mumps, and my face for that time was right out here. And so I then was in the sanatorium for a week or so. But that is just sort of an indicator of the life that one had to live or suffer. Very, very disciplined, and not too much room for shall we say, love or kind attention. So that's an indicator of how tough it was. Well, one way and another, all of us found the regime, I say all of us, most of us found the regime at Reedham very tough and demanding. And after all, we were only, 7 or 8 year olds, and obviously boys used to talk amongst themselves, and so we said, well, you know, perhaps we should run away and go home. And you know, I don't think we thought too much of the consequence of running away. But I think that probably it was intended to put down a marker to say to our parents and to the school that we don't like the regime that they've got there, and that perhaps they would look into it to see whether it could be made more reasonable. So obviously we used to do a lot of planning and plotting about what we may not do and do as youngsters might. And so we decided we were going to run away. Right. So there was about half a dozen of us said, right, yeah, we'll run away together and go to our homes. I don't thought what would happen if we got home, where we would go and what our mothers would do with us. But I suppose that's young lads sort of dreaming and thinking how things might be better. So we said, right, we're going to run away, and we just selected to run away on one particular Saturday evening. And so the plan was that this was in October, middle of October, and that we knew that there was a back entrance to the school which actually wasn't locked. Not that the front really was locked. It wasn't locked, and that you could just walk down through the back of the school site, down a path, and that would take you into Purley and Purley Station, or round by Purley Station. So the plot was that because the lie of the land of the school was on a steep hill, as I said before, you could go in that part of the football field, without being easily seen. The masters in charge wouldn't see the lower part of the football field. So we thought, well, if we were to gather down there at about 7:20, which was the time when we stopped playing football in the evening, we could then, when the whistle went, instead of going up with everybody else to the school, we could nip down out the back gate. So 7:20, we said we would meet up at this particular point behind the football field, ready to go. And so 7:20 came, and I went down to the predetermined point. Nobody else, none of my other friends turned up. And I thought, wow, this is funny. Anyhow, well, we made a plan, and if we said we're going to go 7:20, we go 7:20. So right, shrugged my shoulders and said, right, here goes. Well, I then started off. Well, because I suppose I have a bit of a propensity to run or jog, possibly because I like to get there a bit quicker than just do it by walking. So I then started jogging along the back road towards Purley Station. Fortunately, it was dry at the time, it was good. And as I say, it's October day, October 10th or something like that, catch up with the day. And so that was fine, so I was jogging my way through Purley, then through Croydon. Now that was fine, because as I said to you previously, we'd often been to Purley and Croydon with our mothers on visiting day. So there we go, so I thought, hey, I got to Croydon, haven't been past this point anymore. So I thought, I know, follow the tram lines. I've never been along the road at all in my life, past Croydon. So follow the tram lines through Croydon and on. And this went on fine, yeah, kept going. And because it was all dark, because you weren't allowed any. Is you all right? Yes, I was running along the road, and it was all dark, no street lights. See, it was wartime, bomb, air raid any moment, you see. So, kept on going, and following the tram lines, great. And all of a sudden, Big Ben. I'd arrived at Big Ben.
You're jogging all the way?
Yeah, I saw the jogging.
How old were you then?
7.
7 years old?
Yeah. And got to Big Ben. Because now Big Ben has a nice bright light, you see, on the tower. You can see Big Ben at night. But of course, blackout, nobody has allowed any lights anywhere. I mean, you had a light on, criminal offence. Yeah, what are you doing with the light? Switch that light up. I mean, it's that, you know. And all the windows were covered in proper blind stuff, so you couldn't see through them. So it was an offence to have any lights. So, I mean, you sort of have to feel your way around. I mean, looking back at it, I thought, oh, it's not possible to walk through London in the blackout, in the war, at night. You wouldn't know where you were going. I mean, I mystify myself. I couldn't have done this. It must have been a dream or something. However, got to south side Westminster Bridge.
So how many miles would that have been?
I suppose it's about 15.
15 miles.
Yeah. So, get up to the bridge, and the first policeman comes. I hadn't seen a policeman. I was surprised. I was expecting a policeman. And I thought, because they say, "You boy, what are you doing? Where you come from?" And he'd probably get it out of me that I was from a school called Reedham. And he'd immediately get on the telephone to Reedham and say, "Well, you've got one of your waifs or strays here. You better come and collect him." So up comes the policeman, and I thought, shall I run? No. If I run, he'll say this chap's not up to any good. He'll probably run faster than me anyhow. So he comes along, and I go up to him, and he said, "You boy, what do you think you're doing at this time of night?" Fortunately, I'd worked out what I was going to say. And I told him my story, which was that I'd been to see my aunt down in Kennington. Unfortunately, she'd forgotten to give me the tram fare. And when I got to the tram stop, I realised I hadn't got it, but it wasn't possible to go back and get to her, because she couldn't get up and down the stairs, and therefore there was no future in me trying to get hold of her, and so I was walking home instead. I know the way very well, with my tongue on my teeth, know the way very well because I live on the route, and I explained where it was and how I was going to get there, and you know, as if I'd done it every day of my life. So he said, "All right, boy, hurry up," he said, "because it's getting late, sort of thing, you know, where you go."
So it'd be quite late by now.
Yeah, oh, did I not tell you? It struck 11 o'clock. Big Ben struck 11 o'clock as I got to the bridge. When I thought, "Ooh, that's good." And so I got this policeman, dealt with him. So just over the other side of the bridge, the other side, another policeman. Oh. So I thought, well, if he swallowed the story from the first policeman, perhaps he'll swallow this one again too. So here's hoping. So go up to the policeman, didn't run away and say, "Oh, this is me. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you know, I'm trying to get home, and go with the story again." "All right then, you be quick, because it might be a air raid soon, so you want to hurry up and get home." So, well, if I told that story to a policeman once or twice, it was at least 10, 12, 15 times. You've no idea. But it certainly confirmed to me, have a story and stick to it. So that was all right. I thought, oh, quite imbued with my story. I thought, well, if it's done 3, perhaps I might get away with it, which I did in final analysis. So that's good. So then I started the serious business of trying to get home, because I got to Big Ben.
So how how many more miles to go?
Well, from Big Ben to home would be about 4 to 5 miles through North London and Reedham. And so that was all right. Then I thought I knew where I was, and I thought about the 19 bus route, which I used to use quite regularly. And so I thought, well, if I can find my way to the Piccadilly Circus, Trafalgar Square, I'd be all right, because I knew the route of the 19 bus. But could I find it? I went round and round, and what troubled me, I thought that I was at Nelson's Column. And I thought, well, to get to Nelson's Column, I need to get a turning at the top end of that column area, and then go up in that direction. But because I wasn't actually at Nelson's Column, I was at the steps. Can you stop it?
Oh, don't worry.
I was at I can't quite think where it was, but it was somebody's steps. Another tall statue. So I went round and round. I wasted a lot of time there. But then finally, I got to Nelson's Column. I found my way to Nelson's Column. And then once I was Nelson's Column, I was well on my way through towards Highbury. But then I got into some difficulty and didn't know precisely where I was. And it started to rain. I thought, gee, I got no protection whatsoever. What do we do now? And it started to rain quite hard. And then I thought, well, if I find a telephone box, get some protection from the rain, because I hadn't got any. So I managed to find this box, because there's no light even in the telephone box. So I got in there, and soon after I got in the telephone box, some man had seen me go into this box. And so I thought, oh gosh, I'm not sure about this. So when he came into this telephone box, I could hardly say, hey, get off, this is my box. So he came into this box, and it was raining, you see. And I thought, well, don't like being too close to anybody, certainly a man like this. So anyhow, he started getting a bit too close to me. So I thought, hello, I don't like the feel of you getting close to me. So rain or no rain, I was out of that telephone box before you could say knife. And fortunately he didn't start trying to chase me or catch me up. So I managed to hand him off. But I still haven't solved my problem of being a bit lost. However, I kept walking, looking for somewhere which was familiar to me, and not after too much time, I managed to find my way to home. And then I thought, gee, I didn't know what the time was then, I don't think. But it was very dark. It was October, very dark. Been raining, and I found the road we lived in. I thought, oh. But Mother lived on the 3rd floor of this tenement house. There's about 5 different people living in it. We lived on the top floor, 2 rooms on the top floor. So, to signify that the caller was for the top floor, it was 5 knocks on the knocker. Well, bearing in mind that you're on the top floor, you need to bang pretty hard if the person's going to hear, because it's a long way from the bottom to the top. So I thought, oh dear, I shall get murdered for banging the door knocker at this time of night. So I thought, well, there's nothing for it, I'll walk along. I'm going to bang on the door. So drew my breath and then said, right, here goes. Bang, 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 4 downgrade, knocked on the door and the death, you know, it was all quiet. Fortunately, up the area hadn't started by then. And so anyhow, that woke people in the house, and down they came, including my mother. Of course, my mother was absolutely distraught to find that I, without any notice, was going to leave Reedham, run away from Reedham, and just bang on her door in the middle of the night. So, I mean, I think, you know, she would have had me for breakfast if she was allowed to. So, in I went, and that was a very tough time, that was. My mother was absolutely distraught. She cried and cried. And I said, I'm not going back, I'm not going back. She said, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because she didn't know where to put me or anything. And so, I mean, looking back on it, I should never have put my mother through it. But it had happened. And so, the following day, I told her, I said, I'm not going back. I said, I'm not going back. And she said, well, what am I going to do with you? I said, well, you have to find some solution. I said, if I were to go back, I would get caned publicly. They'd really put me through it. Life would, you know, worse in fact, it would be awful. And so, I mean, you know, and afterwards I put myself in another's position. There she was in the war, lost her husband, got me, virtually no possessions, and here's me run out of the school that had given me shelter for these few years, recent years, you see. So anyhow, what used to happen was that anybody who ran away from the school had a public caning in the school. Right? So there'd be everybody parade in the open, be all right, and so as to deter anybody else from running away, they would give you a public caning on the basis, well, if we give you a public caning, other people might not play the same lark. So she's like, what can I do? She said, you must go back to Reedham, must go back to school. So anyhow, obviously, messages went back from my mum to the school. And so it was agreed that I would go back to Reedham, that I would go into the sanatorium for a week, and they would sort of take it from there, but I wouldn't get a caning. And so what in fact came out of this was a recognition that you know, I shouldn't be punished, and that there was a need for the school to examine the circumstances in which I and others found myself, and they should be explored. And so after a week I went back, but the senior housemaster didn't discuss it, didn't mention it. It was in effect closed. It was closed subject. so far as I know, no reference was made by the school authorities or the housemasters to the rest of the school, anybody, and that I had done this, but I was sick, sort of thing. I wasn't well or something, so they made a bit of a cover-up story really for it. And so after that week in the sanatorium, I went back to school as if nothing had happened. So it was uncanny that the air raid siren went as soon as I got in.
Really? It was like, hey, I'm home.
Yeah,
But
that's it.
there's another uncanny thing. It was reported in the evening news.
Oh, should we be getting this on here? Is it running?
It was reported in the evening news, and neither my mother or I or anybody I knew had any inkling, any idea that it had got into the press.
How was it reported? What was it reported as?
All I heard, and somebody had a cutting of this in London Evening News.
I wonder whether we could find it.
Well, I think I ought to.
What year was it?
1942, something like October 17th.
One day before the wedding.
October the 17th.
Something like October. It was a Saturday.
Yeah.
So it's a Saturday in the middle of October. I mean to go to the library of newspapers. It used to be up in Cricklewood. But
So what newspaper would it have been?
in the London Evening News
Evening, yeah.
of the Monday night following.
Boy runs away from school. Maybe it was one of the tenants. One of the tenants in your mum's building. Did they know about it?
Wouldn't have thought so. No, wouldn't have thought so. But certainly a mystery how it got there. Yeah. Very embarrassing, really. Because the thing says, boy runs away. Boy runs away, and his first words were, "Please can I have a drink of water?" Well, I never remember that. I mean, and I think somebody just made it up. Somebody had heard that I'd run away, or somebody had run away from school, right? And they thought, well, how can we make it a story? And they just dreamt it up. Because my mother agreed with me. She said, well, you never asked for a drink of water. Yeah.
It's funny.
But only recently, since you've been interesting yourself in my bits and pieces, and I thought, yes, they didn't, the school didn't punish me. I wonder if it was the fact that somehow, some way, to the newspaper that I'd run away, and that if, as a consequence of running away, I was given a cane or punished, that also could have gone into the newspaper subsequently and would be adverse publicity for the school. In other words, that the school didn't actually have a lot of scope, knowing that this had somehow got into the public domain. They had to play the white man, they had to treat with me fairly and honourably, otherwise it would have got into, there would have been a follow-up in the press that the boy that ran away from school got the cane and was beaten or whatever, and that sort of thing. So it makes the story that much more interesting as to who actually put it in. about until I'm telling you this now. That obviously my godmother, Evie Dent, my mum's friend, worked in London. Would have known the story from her mum, and she may have been talking to somebody at W.H. Smith's, and that may have said, really? You want to talk so-and-so about it. So that may be how it got in. But as I say, on reflection, that may have been the very reason I didn't get a caning, because it got into the public domain for some reason.
Did they know how many miles you travelled?
Yeah. Yeah, they said boy runs Hanover Pool. I think they said 15 miles or something, or 20 miles. Or they mentioned, I think, the number of miles that I've gone.
So I suppose that's a good heartwarming story as well. To say that, we're fighting here, fighting the Germans, and even, the young boy can travel 15, 20 miles on his own. We've got the metal to
so about that, but what we're coming to.
But it's a good news story. It would be an interesting
Yeah.
story. A lot of bad news in the wartime.
Absolutely. On the other hand, you see, there was the deep unhappiness on my part of the way in which I was being treated at school. It's a long time ago, Ian.
But there would be a lot of orphans as a result of the war as well, I would guess. People, fathers being lost.
Oh, yes.
So, to think that you're fighting the war and your son or daughter could end up in an orphanage, you don't really want that orphanage to be a horrible place.
Yeah. Well, indeed, I, as I say, it's only recently, since you've kindly taken an interest with me on this, that it was a story that had got out somehow, some way, and that precluded the school taking drastic action against me.
Yeah.
I did try, I said, well, how has it gone in there? There we are.
We haven't got too much time left, but
Not too much.
Do you have to download it and then use
15
the tape
minutes.
again?
15 minutes. It's okay, Karen.
Part of my problem at the time was the fact that we had to rely on second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand clothes, hand-downs, including shoes. I mean, it would be quite common for the boys to have shoes which got half a dozen different numbers on, because they'd been handed down from one boy to the next.
Where were the numbers?
They were, well, we had leather shoes, they had leather in those days. We had, on the inside, they would put your number, your school number, would go on there. And then, when you grew out of them and they went to somebody else, yours would have a line through it, and then they put the other ones on, you see. I mean, there would be probably half a dozen different numbers on the inside of the shoes. I mean, that was all right, but it got a bit embarrassing actually when I went out to Purley County School. Because when I went out to the grammar school, we still had hand-me-down clothes, including shoes. So the other boys in the class would say, "What have you got on your shoes there?" "Oh, well, these are another numbers." "Oh, gee, you've got hand-me-down shoes? Wow, that's a bit off, isn't it?" sort of thing. So that's been part of my existence, if you like, at school, with hand-me-down shoes. I think actually it happens quite a lot in families. But going back to the shoes, because the chief housemaster used to sort out the shoes. He said, right, you should have a new pair of shoes, you need a bigger pair of shoes. Well, my instep is very high, and I've got a wide foot, but not a very long foot. And I'm very difficult actually to fit in shoes terms. And so on a sort of standard basis, I have two things going against me. First, as I say, I've got a high instep, and secondly, wide. And so I was invariably given shoes which were too tight. And so they became painful. And this actually was the precursor of my problem and dissatisfaction with school, that I was going to run away. So at that time I was having a row with the senior housemaster, and shoes figured. And as it happened, we had a set of shoes which were, if you like, your main shoes, and then another shoes which were called your house shoes, which you only basically used within the school building, not to go out. But if you needed your shoes repaired, then you would wear your house shoes on a day-to-day basis. That was allowed. And that was the situation I was in. I had a pair of main shoes which were too tight for me, and I was complaining about them, and they were investigating them because I said they were too tight, and the housemaster said they weren't. And so whilst that was going on, I wore my house shoes, which were much softer and much more flexible, so I could wear those all right. And it was in those shoes that I actually ran away in, rather than my main shoes, which would be very tight and very painful to me. So that was part of the argument or problem that I had at the time with the housemaster. So yes, we had to make do with shoes and clothes very much on hand-me-downs, but in the round it didn't trouble us. We weren't too. I don't think we could ever have any room for vanity at Reedham.